bit abruptly, but we're going to start from the same place. So what I was talking about was the fact that by default, my joints, when I double click on the joint, is oriented based on the settings on that tool. So the X is the primary axis, and what that means is that my X always point toward the child. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this so I can see a little bit better. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my root joint right here. Oops, right here. Select that pelvis joint. And first and foremost, what I'm going to do is I'm going to freeze my transformation right now. Modify, freeze transformation. So everything gets zeroed out. Then I'm going to actually go into checking what is the orientation of all my joints. So I'm going to go under display, transform display, and local orientation axis. And it'll show me on that joint what's the local orientation axis. And I'm seeing that is actually the X is pointing strangely up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move to the next joint right here, and I'm going to hit G. Now is exactly how it's supposed to be. You remember when I said the X is going down toward the child? I'm going to click on this one and hit G, and once again the X is looking down, is going down. But what happens if I actually go, I'm going to zoom right here, select this joint this time and hit G? You can see it's flipped. So there is a situation oftentimes, I'm going to go do the same thing, in which because you have this situation which you mirrored your joint, the thing starts getting a little bit messy. Let's try to do the same thing on this shoulder. I'm going to hit G. I'm going to actually zoom to see it a little bit better. And I see my X, as it should, is going toward the child. But when I go right in here and I hit G, my X is going the opposite direction. Bottom line, your joint orientation can get a bit messy because of all this mirroring that we're doing. So one of the things that we should do is try to reorient all my joints at most we can in mass. That means not going one joint at a time, because it will take quite a while. So what we want to do is select the root joint once again and go under skeleton orient joint. So if I go in here and I say orient joint, you notice that it fixed quite a while. Now my Y is pointing out, my X is pointing toward the child, as it should. So things got quite a bit better. Now I'm not sure if they got perfectly better, because the test ultimately, actually, sorry, I'm going to zoom on the legs and see if that got, yeah, that got fixed too. You can see now that my X is pointing down as it should, and here my X is pointing up because the child is up here actually. So it looks fine, but the ultimate test to see if it's fine is to actually grab certain individual joints that I know I'm going to definitely bend a certain way, and actually bend them, rotate them, I mean, and see if that rotation stays positive. So I give you an example. If I take the knee joint, the left knee joint right here, and then I'm going to go and rotate Z, and I middle mouse click to rotate that joint, and I see that is actually negative, that is not good. If I go in the following one and do the same exact thing, is actually positive. Sorry, I said negative, but it is, in this case, it's positive, because I generally bend backward my knee, right? So it's a 5.76, and there it is. It's actually positive. That's great. I'm going to undo. Let me try this one again and see if I made a mistake earlier, actually. Sorry, guys. That's how I bend. It's positive, this one too. My knee bends in this direction. I probably was bending it accidentally in the other one, but it's positive as well. That's fantastic. So let's try now with the hip. I'm going to take this hip, and I'm going to try to see what happens if I do in rotate Y and I middle mouse click. Moving forward. Let me see. Oops, sorry. I said Y, but I need to, if that particular joint is actually going to rotate in this direction, that is Z, so I apologize. So there we are. So if I go in the rotate Z and do this, is actually, if it was moving this direction, is moving fine. And so what I would do right now is do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to go in the rotate Z once again and try to see, and it's positive, so we're okay. Lastly, I want to go and see what happens with my elbow. So if I grab my elbow, and I know it's bending in this direction, that is the rotate Y. That's why earlier I said rotate Y. I was thinking about the elbow. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to middle mouse click. And actually that one is negative. That's the way my elbow would be bending, right? Oops. Do Apple Z, Apple Z. I'm going to rotate the view so you see what I mean. My elbow would be moving in this direction. So when I go and rotate Y and I click and drag, is going negative. That is not good. Let's try with the other elbow. If I go and rotate Y and I middle mouse click, is positive. Okay, so it looks like the one that does not work is the elbow. The orientation is not proper. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go and display local orientation axis to see what's going on in that situation. Y is up, even though it looks like is correct, you know, compared to the prior. I'm going to hit G. So let me try again. If I want to move it in this direction, it's definitely negative. That is not good. Okay, how do I fix it? There are various ways to fix it. One is manually, and I'll show you in a minute. But another way is to do a little Mel script. So I'm going to go in the Mel script editor and type rotate space 180. That's for the X. And then 0 and 0 semicolon. So I grab this little script and I'm going to go in my custom shelf. So you can see I have quite a few more script. And I'm going to middle mouse drag up here. It's going to ask me if I want it as Mel or Python. I'm going to choose Mel. And what I'm going to do right now is, having this elbow selected, I'm going to click on my script. And as you can see, it flipped the axis as I asked it to, still leaving the X in the direction of the child as it should. So right now if I go on my rotate Y and I middle mouse click, it's still actually negative. That is not good. That means I might have to do it manually. So how do I do it manually? One way to do it manually is to go in component mode. So in this mode, right mouse click on the question mark and say local rotation axis to see this exact thing. And then what you need to do at that point is to rotate it. Oops. Select it, obviously. Sorry, I'm in the scale by accident. I want to be in the rotate. And then you rotate your axis to what you need it to be. So if the Y is pointing down, but the prior was pointing up and it was not working. So let it point it this direction and see what happens. Sorry. So bottom line is, one other way to fix it, not that I'm particularly good at it, I tend to like better to do it through my script, is to go in here and do it manually and then go back into the object mode and once again try to rotate it and see. Sorry, the rotate Y is what I'm playing with. And is actually now fixed. The rotate Y now is positive. His problem is my elbow is bending up and down, and then the up is actually, I'm going to actually do this. I'm going to try to click on my script again and do the same exact thing. I'm going to try once again to rotate it in component mode. It's always a little bit tricky. I think the Y should point up, so I'm going to make it. That's actually what I'm pretty certain. And by the way, you can go into a different view if you need to. Means I might go in the, see, I messed up a little bit here. I actually rotated in such a way that is actually more messy than it should be. So I'm going to straighten it up. That's why I was saying that you have to, at times, go actually in a view that is easier, that is an orthogonal view, because in the perspective view it's really hard to fix things. Okay, So now you see this is kind of a little bit of a problem, I think, is that the y is pointing up in this direction and is pointing down in the other direction. But let's actually take my rotate y once again. Oh wait, sorry, I need to go in object mode and once again see how it goes. Now it's fixed. You guys can see that the rotation of my elbow when I bend my elbow forward is now finally positive. But is that going to be okay with the following joints? Because you remember the following joints, the y is actually flipped. It's actually good. It's working okay. So bottom line is, what you need to do is you need to be aware that you have to test all your joint and make sure this one is good. That's awesome. That everything that is supposed to bend is going to bend in a positive fashion. If you want to bend it, you basically take the rotation you're going to have and try to bend it and see if it's going to bend properly. Actually take this and bend it. Oops. And by the way, whatever you bend, make sure that then you undo it to bring the joint back to what it's supposed to be. So so here we are. Now you know that you can achieve the mass reorientation of your joint through that skeleton orient joint, or you can go in individually with your little component mode. If you need to see in that joint how is oriented, like here I don't see it. No, actually right now I have it everywhere. That's fantastic. And remember, if you notice all your children, the X always point toward the children. In this case, remember though, for the spine, it points up because we're going in this direction. So anyway, what I want to tell you is that how important is when you eventually are done with your joints, that you go through the joints and look at the orientation and take each individually and rotate it based on how it's going to indeed rotate later on. Means if you know that you want, when this guy kicks, to have this joint turn in this direction, you definitely want to, sorry. And actually I don't have the right joint selected, I'm noticing here. So if you want this joint to turn in a certain direction, you definitely want it to, if it's rotate. I have selected the wrong joint. Remember, one thing you can do, sometimes it gets tricky to select the right joint. So often what I do eventually is say, hey, look, I want the left knee selected. I go through the outliner to do it. But that's kind of what, there it is, what it means to get your joints oriented, is to kind of go in first in a mass way and then in an individual joint by joint way and try to figure out how they turn. Like even in the foot, we didn't really play much with it, but I generally do go through most of the joints and try to rotate them and fix them. It's a little bit time consuming and I don't think I'm a pro at it, but I definitely don't ever neglect this step because I know that is quite important in order to have a proper rig, in order to not run into major problem later on. All right, the next video is going to be about, we're going to continue and we're going to try to bind the skin to the joints, and not try, we will succeed. I'll just talk about that part. All right, thank you guys.